It's Thursday, July 2nd, and time for your Barbados Tea Morning News Update. Barbados's water situation is at a crisis level. So warns Minister of Energy and Water Resources Wilfred Abrams, who is again appealing to Barbadians not to waste the precious supply. His call came following yesterday's decision to shut down the Bowmanston pumping station due to low water levels in the aquifer. The move means residents and businesses in St. John, St. George, St. Joseph and St. Andrew will be affected by water outages.
It is not business as usual. We need to curb the way that we use water. We need to start looking at water differently. Water is like the new oil. So we need to stop wasting water. We need to follow the water authorities' tips. I feel the pain of the people in the northern parishes, the parishes of higher elevation, that are complaining, that are feeling the brunt of this. Dr. John explained it. We need to conserve the water we are using so they can get some.
Minister Abrams said the only way to ensure everyone on the island was adequately serviced with water was through the construction of desalination plants. And while he said it was an option government was willing to consider, he pointed out that it was extremely expensive.
Desal has to be a part of our planning going forward. The Water Authority itself is looking to install two temporary packaged desal plants, a saltwater desal plant and a brackish water desal plant. And we're also engaged in conversations with persons for the supply of industrial desal. Never was it our position that desal is not going to be a part of our solution. The only way to actually guarantee you have a steady supply completely without reference to anything else is actually to pull the water from the sea. So it does form a part of our plan, but it has to be a part of our plan that makes sense. Desal is the most expensive form of water that we can get. If Barbadians were willing to pay the economic cost of pulling the water, whether it be out of the ground or whether it be from a desal source, then our problems would disappear. But our water is already among the lowest in the world. Among the lowest cost in the world.
Caribbean governments are plotting a new course to stimulate and facilitate intra-regional travel. The disclosure from outgoing CARICOM chairman, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who said the plan includes a review of taxes long blamed for the high cost of intra-regional travel and matters relating to licensing. With Liat 1974 Limited en route to liquidation, Mottley signaled it would not be business as usual as efforts get underway to fill the void.
Yeah, the conversations that we've been having with each other relate around ensuring that we do that which is necessary to allow those airlines that can move people to do so. Liat is a treasured institution, and we regret that it has come to this stage. Over hundreds of millions of dollars of debt, accumulated legacy debt, and a very difficult environment within which to function. There are other airlines there. How best can we facilitate them and to make sure that they can provide, as I said, that safe, affordable, and reliable travel? And I believe that heads have agreed that, look, we're going to look at taxes, and Prime Minister Mitchell has been strong on this again. Prime Minister Gonzalez has already started. We are looking at it in Barbados. A number of us recognize that even if we had needed the money before, we're going to have to create that kind of environment to be able to stimulate travel in the region, because travel has a greater multiplier effect within the context of our economies than other things. Secondly, we're going to have to look and see how we can also deal with the licensing, because in some instances, even though we have these other 29 regional airlines all about the place, in some instances, they don't have access to the Fifth Freedom and the Seventh Freedom rights that they need to be able to move easily between the islands. So that's our role as governments.
Appearing as a guest on the radio show Ladies' Room in Grenada, Prime Minister Mottley said she was also in favor of the private sector taking the lead on a proposed new carrier, as suggested by leading economist Dr. Justin Ram.
I do believe that the private sector ought to be taking the lead. I saw that the former chief economist of the Caribbean Development Bank, Justin Ram, in today's papers making the same point, and I agree with him. I think governments may keep small shares in whatever may be created to be able to give the private sector investors the comfort that we are not going to subject them to regulatory confusion and long processes. But predominantly, we need lean entities that are private sector driven and where people are focused on how do they stay afloat through making a profit and through ensuring that there's adequate cash flow while providing the service to our people.
In other news, fisher folk at the Berinda Cox Fish Market reflected on the life of well-known vendor Rita Hunt during a candlelight vigil held last evening. The 74-year-old Hunt, formerly of Upper Cadders Gap, Christchurch, lost her life last week after she was struck by a car at the Oistins Market. Members of the Spiritual Baptist Church led family members, close friends, colleagues, and members of Parliament Ralph Thorne and Cook Humphrey as they paid tribute to Hunt, who was affectionately referred to as the mother of the market.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from the region, the Caribbean Court of Justice will on Wednesday, July 8th, decide whether or not it has jurisdiction to hear an appeal filed by two senior members of Guyana's main opposition People's Progressive Party Civic in relation to a Court of Appeal ruling on the disputed March 2nd elections. More in this report from News Source Guyana.
After listening to arguments for more than 7 hours in the Guyana election declaration case, the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Justice Adrian Saunders, announced that the court will hand down its decision on the case next Wednesday, the 8th of July. The case was taken before the CCJ by the presidential candidate and the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. Through their attorney Douglas Mendez, they are requesting that the court throw out the Guyana Court of Appeal's decision on the interpretation of the words more votes than to mean more valid votes in the Guyana Constitution. During his submission before the court this morning, Mr. Mendez, while conceding that the CCJ had no jurisdiction to hear the appeal, said the court should still act in dismissing the decision of the Guyana Court of Appeal. He was adamant that the Guyana Court of Appeal lacked jurisdiction to even have entertained the original matter.
And finally, the number of working hours lost across the world in the first half of 2020 was significantly worse than previously estimated, and the International Labour Organization's director, Guy Ryder, has warned that there will be large-scale job losses as the highly uncertain recovery in the second half of the year will not be enough to go back to pre-COVID pandemic levels.
But I think the first piece of news, and it's a bad piece of news, is that the situation is worse than we had previously estimated for the first half of this year, which is now coming to an end. Our latest estimate is for the loss of the equivalent of 400 million full-time jobs. That's up from 305 million in our estimate of 1 month ago. And this reflects the fact that the pandemic is really hitting hard, particularly in the Americas, in the developing world in general, but in the Americas. Even the best scenarios, none of them takes us back to the situation where we started the year. There will be considerable loss of jobs and employment and through to the end of this year, and that's really a worry.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.